The following is a presentation of the Mat Talk Podcast Network.
You are now tuned in to the PA Power Podcast, College Edition, featuring Mason Beckman and Tristan Warner. PA Power Wrestling. Pennsylvania is wrestling.
Welcome in, wrestling fans. You are now dialed into the PA Power College Podcast. And as Jason Bryant of the Mat Talk Podcast Network said, I'm Tristan Warner, joined by my main man as always, Mason Beckman, a.k.a. Beck Diggity. Mason, episode 25. We're a quarter century of the way there. And before we even get into wrestling, I got to say, big weekend for the PH Filthy Birds down there in Philadelphia, bringing home the Super Bowl Super Bowl Lombardi Trophy, whatever it's called. How about that?
That's crazy, man. You know, first of all, congrats. Good on you guys. I don't like Philly sports, but you guys are a loyal group of human beings, and I respect it. So,
been waiting a lifetime for that one. Didn't think I would ever see it in my lifetime, to be fully honest. But
right,
it's a big brick released off the shoulders.
Yeah, you know what's kind of crazy is you really think about our lifetime, and even just the last. Since 2004, right? Since the Red Sox came back from 3-0 against the Yankees. Think about like the streaks we've seen end, because there was that one. The Chicago White Sox hadn't won in forever. The Cubs won a World Series. You know, the Eagles won a Super Bowl. The Cavs, Cleveland won a title, right? So it's kind of been, it's like all these streaks have been coming to an end lately, you know what I mean? Or within the last 10, 15 years. It's been a pretty cool time to be a sports fan the last 10 years or so, with all these streaks ended. You know, you get to see all this historic stuff.
Yeah, great games too.
Right.
You just think about some of the championships we've seen in the last year, some of the series like in basketball and hockey, and then the last two Super Bowls we've had, the NCAA College Football Championship. Some of the games have just gone down to the wire, and they've been very exciting. So, interesting stuff.
Right. So let's get on into it, man. First things first, outstanding wrestlers of the weekend. Who you got?
I guess you got to go with Anthony Cassar, I would say. Almost a no-brainer. I mean, there was a ton of great performances over the weekend, but his stands out the most. This is a guy that's, still fighting for a starting spot in Penn State's lineup. Not even sure which guy is even going to wrestle in the postseason. And this guy goes out there against the undisputed number one guy in the country with a dual meet on the line, and goes out and makes the magic happen. 2 takedowns I think he had, 2 beautiful takedowns.
Right.
Gets a solid win over number 1 Colin Moore. So Anthony Cassar, not a PA native, but he wears the blue and white for Penn State, so I'm going with Cassar.
Oh yeah, Cassar's a no-brainer, man. And you could go up and down the Penn State lineup. I mean, you could easily say Bo Nickel. You could easily say Chenzo. You could easily say Mark Hall. Honestly, you could make an argument for for Nevels and Carson Kuhn. And, we'll get into all of that later, but Cassar is definitely the guy that stands out. The other guy worth mentioning was Mikey Carr. Mikey Carr had another undefeated weekend, and he's getting up around that 10-11 range in the rankings. He's a freshman for Illinois, right? Yeah.
I think so.
Right.
Redshirt freshman, maybe?
Yeah. So, a South Fayette native, down here in the Whippeal and everything. Mikey Carr is quietly putting together an extremely impressive season, and he's going to be a guy, and we'll mention him here in a little bit, but he's been a guy that's putting together a really good season and could make some very serious noise here in the next month or so. So challenge bricks, there's a few here. I think my number one, and I've seen an alternate angle, but I still kind of feel the same way about this call. So did you see the Deacon Sorensen overtime?
Yeah, I think I saw it because I think you tweeted it.
Or I probably retweeted it or something. Yeah. So for anybody that hasn't seen it, Ryan Deacon from Northwestern and Brandon Sorensen are in overtime. And Deacon I thought did a great job of moving his hands. Right? Was just pulling on Sorensen's head and went to turn Sorensen's head and he turns his head, attacks the leg. He's got a single leg up high. The official blows it dead and says that Deacon pulled Sorensen's headgear, awards a point to Sorensen, and the match is over, right? So you watch it again, and I mean, watching it live, it didn't look at all like there was even contact with his headgear, right? Christian Piles tweeted out a freeze frame of what looks like Deacon's hand grabbing it. Honestly, I still don't agree with the call. I really fully believe it was a situation where Deacon was pulling his head, Sorensen went to slide his head away, Deacon's hand slid through, hit his headgear, and kept sliding. There was never once when I watched that something to me that looked like Deacon tried to grab his headgear. You know what I mean? You know, it's one.
Yeah,
it's one thing if you get
the Mark Hall Zahid situation last year was a similar thing, but I think Zahid came right out in an interview right after and admitted that he grabbed his headgear, like took responsibility, and so that's probably a more blatant example.
Right. Yeah.
But I will say, when I looked at the box score, I want to say it said the final score was 7-3 overtime Sorensen. Is that wrong? Was it blown dead right there, and that was the match? I
don't know. Yeah, I think so, because I'm pretty sure they were on their feet. I thought it was sudden victory. I haven't seen the whole match. It was a Sunday duel, and I was in practice, so I didn't see the whole bout. I've been meaning to go back and watch it, just been busy. But I believe it was sudden victory, and that ended it, but I don't know. Either way.
Yeah. That'll probably lead into a couple other challenge bricks we have the weekend, but referees sometimes just jump in there and it almost seems like they try to be controversial. They try to influence the outcome, instead of just letting the guys wrestle. Too much of that going on that I've seen at the high school and the college level.
Agreed. Who else? What do you got, though?
Aside from that, we have on here that Ohio State's national champs, none of them did their job in the dual meet. Mason, you can expand upon this, but I mean, obviously, it's hard to ever say a bad word about Kyle Snyder, but they needed him to go out and get the major to even tie the dual meet to get them to win on criteria. And, it almost looked like he tried to do too much too soon and almost put himself in. I mean, it's almost impossible to say Kyle Snyder's in bad position, but I guess Neville's wrestled an extremely tough match, and Snyder just wasn't able to get that 8-point margin. Ended up being, I think, 15-10. I mean, still hit some beautiful takedowns, but so did Neville, so credit to him and Penn State.
Right. So, you got 3 national champs in the lineup. Tomasello's performance, the jury's still out on for me, just because we don't have a good gauge on where Carson Kuhn is at. You know what I mean? We don't have a good gauge.
We can say he's got a pretty filthy headlock.
Oh, my Lord. That was just disgusting.
And to see that against a national champ who's built like Tomasello,
he's
that says
lucky
even more.
It wasn't in bounds, because it was definitely going to be 6. And I don't know that Tomasello would have come off his back, but that's all hypotheticals, right? So Tomasello's, I'm a little slower to judge. Miles Martin, what do you say? Gives up bonus points, and I realize how good Bo Nickel is, and I understand that Bo has now beaten him 5 of 7. But you still can't send a national champ on the mat and give up bonus, right?
Yeah, and just the manner in which the bonus were given up, whatever the proper grammar term there is. If you watch that match from start whistle to end whistle, Bo pretty much dominated, but even, last 5 seconds of the match, it's 8-2, I think, and Miles is kind of sprawled out on his belly there on bottom, just waiting for the clock to run down. And a lot of guys do that, and it makes it look worse for Miles, considering how high profile that match was and how the end result ended up being influenced by that one move there at the end. But you can't tell me that Miles didn't do anything different than a lot of guys would, especially when you're in a match that you think, it's 1 against 2, you can go out and beat this guy, and you're down 8-2 with 5 seconds left. I mean, it's not uncommon to lay there on your belly, sprawled out on the mat, and wait for that clock to run out. Where I'm sure Tom Ryan is having a fit is that Bo locked up that Zane Rutherford-esque bow and arrow and just grabbed that ankle, torqued it over, got a quick 2-swipe literally as time expired, and that one bonus point ended up being the difference in the dual meet.
Right.
So
right.
that's why you always wrestle the full whistle to whistle. I mean, in theory, that's what you say. You can't necessarily, it's hard to sit here on the couch and fault the national champ, Miles Martin, for, giving up that last 2 swipes. But, I mean, in theory, as a coach, that's why you always tell your guy wrestle from whistle to whistle.
Right. And then Snyder, you talked about. I don't think Snyder wrestled poorly. I think you hit the nail on the head. He tried to do too much too soon. So, what do you have anything else in here you want to touch on, or you want to move on to listener questions?
Something funny from the Penn State Ohio State match. I'm not sure if anybody else caught this. I thought it was just funny more than anything, but it was a little interesting. I'm not sure which commentator said it. I'm not sure if it was Jim Gibbons or one of the other guys, but they were wrestling the 165 match. He was talking about Chenzo against Tashan Campbell, and I'm not sure what context. I'd have to go back and watch it, but I almost feel like it was toward the end of the bout maybe, and maybe he was talking about how he didn't look tired or something, but he said something to the effect of, I mean, look at Chenzo Joseph's face, and then he says, I mean, he has a nice face. He's a good-looking guy. And that one had me
that's awesome,
laughing and also scratching my head at the same time. So
I thought
that was pretty funny.
I totally missed that. I'm so glad you brought that up, that you put that in this rundown, because I completely missed that, and I went back and found it and was just laughing hysterically.
You did go back and find it, so I didn't imagine that, right?
No, it happened. I was dying.
Okay. I was wondering if I was the only one who caught that.
Jim Gibbons is always good for a couple of interesting calls. So my all-time favorite Jim Gibbons call, Michigan was wrestling Penn State. It was a while ago now. It was like my sophomore or junior year, my second or third year. But it was Alton and Grijalles. And it was right after, I think, Alton had gotten back from being hurt or something. I think it was Andrew. Andrew builds a big lead, and Grijalles digs the whole way back. And it was Grijalles' senior night, too. And Andrew he hit a brick wall. Just ran out of gas. And Grijalles scores the takedown to go, into the lead with about 20 seconds left. And Jim Gibbons is just yelling the words, "He's dead."
That's not...
he got it. He's dead. Oh, he's dead. So the running...
I'm not sure that's the most politically correct commentating, but...
No, it was just too funny. So me and my buddies were sitting there watching it. We're like, so is Andrew just going to be dead in a ditch somewhere now? Or, what just happened? So, yeah, Jim Gibbons, always good for some interesting calls. But that aside, listener questions for the week. Jordan Moss, Wayne Danger legend himself, out there on the West Coast now. He asked, he's actually the one that brought Mikey Carr to our attention. Said that Mikey's having a great season, this, that, and the other thing. And he goes, man, he's a legitimate All-American contender. So his question was, how many freshman All-Americans can Pennsylvania natives get this year? So just looking at it, I think this list here's each guy, some better than others, right? But I think each guy on this list has a very legitimate chance of getting through. So Spencer DeSanto, Hayden Hidlay are the three that are no-brainers, right? Spencer's ranked third, DeSanto's fourth, and Hidlay is third. So those three right out of the chute, easy answers. Then kind of the next tier, these next three guys, they're all in that 10 to 12 range in the ranks. So they're kind of, if everything plays out to their seeding, they'd be in the round of 12, and they got to beat one guy that they're quote-unquote not supposed to. And these three guys are Mikey Carr, who we mentioned, Luke Karam, who's Lehigh's 41. He's ranked, 11 or 12, I think. And Jordan Wood, who's Lehigh's heavyweight, who's ranked in that same range. Especially heavyweight, just because don't know.
Anything can happen up there.
Right.
You had some random guys in the blood round every year. I remember last year, Conan Jennings from Northwestern, total unseeded. I think he had like a 500 record. He comes out, upsets like the 6th seed in the first round, then he upsets like the 11 seed in the second round, and before you know it, he's in the quarters, which is automatically blood round. So, I mean, literally anybody can, if you get there, you're a legit contender.
Yes, absolutely. So, I think 6 is very realistic. I'm not saying 6 will happen, but I think all 6 of those guys are definitely in a very serious conversation for getting on the podium. And that, if all 6 were to come to fruition, that would be pretty wild, man. Having 6 freshman All-Americans, I think at least 2 of which are true freshmen. So that'd be a pretty cool thing.
That would be cool, especially because Pennsylvania has to get back on the horse and regain their title of having most All-Americans from Ohio that we let slip away last year. So six freshman All-Americans would be huge to go toward that title.
Huge. So the next question. What big changes or adjustments did you have to make when transitioning from high school wrestling to Division I? The guy that sent me this question, told me a story about his friends made the transition from high school to Division I and said that the hand fighting adjustment was just nasty and your face felt like you came out of an MMA fight all the time. So Tristan, I'll let you lead this one.
I would say hand fighting is definitely a huge one in high school. I mean, especially for an upper weight, I kind of wrestled out in the open. I mean, I did my whole career, but I would say in high school when you tie up with guys, it's more of like you don't really put as much pressure on the head or the arms or anything. It's more of like you just kind of tie up to, I don't know. I mean, at least in my opinion, when I got to college, I remember my coach telling me, like, when you put your hands on a guy's neck or on his arms or anything, you should always be pulling down, or you know what I mean, applying pressure. And that wasn't something I really did in high school. So I just remember coming out of practices my first summer and my first year of college, and I just could barely lift my neck up. And this isn't even wrestling guys necessarily who were, national ranked or studs, really. These were just some of my random teammates at ODU, just getting your neck pulled on, getting, tired from that. And that just wears out your whole body, wears out your back, everything. So that's number one. Number two, I would say wrestling on top. In high school, there's no riding time in high school. So, I mean, that just changes the match in general. In college, you're able to you don't necessarily always have to be, I mean, in theory, you want to be working for a pin, but in college, there's a lot of rides that you can put on top that, you can get away with more in college because you're working for that riding time point. You can throw double boots in, get a guy flat, hold him down. You can get out to the wrist and get out to the side with an inside bar, that kind of stuff, and just grind a guy out. And in high school, you don't see that as much. So, and like we saw with the Spencer Lee Tomasello match, I would say keeping a guy down is a huge difference because you want to get that riding time point. You don't want to let him have that point. That could be the difference in a match. Where in high school, you can ride a guy out for 2 minutes and it doesn't really matter. You're not really getting an advantage other than you're not giving him a point.
Right. I think for me the biggest adjustment was college guys fight every point tooth and nail. In high school, a lot of times, if you really beat a guy, if you kind of burn a guy on a shot, I don't want to say they kind of let you have it, but there's a little bit of that. They kind of concede the takedown and then continue to wrestle. In college, you get to a leg and the fight has just started. There are very few free escapes. Just, there's no point. There are no points that come easy in college, and that is definitely not the case in high school. The other thing, too, that's a big jump is just every guy is really, really good. So it's not like in high school where even you and I, both of us came from powerhouse programs, there were guys in your high school room you could go grab a hold of and, if you kind of wanted a night off, so to speak, right? That doesn't happen in college. Everybody in that room is really, really good. And every time you step on the line to compete, it could be against the worst team in Division I wrestling. The worst team in Division I wrestling is still very, very good. It's like the same kind of thing people say about the Cleveland Browns because they went 0-16. All of those guys are still NFL players. They're all still extremely good. So that's probably what I would say was the hardest adjustment to college wrestling, was just that everybody is that good that there is no easy point. There is no easy match. Absolutely everything is a fist fight. So then the last listener question, and this one I think is on everybody's minds. What's Penn State doing 197? What do you do with Cassar and Rasheed?
My goodness. That's the question of the year.
It seriously is. It's got to be the most baffling lineup question in America right now.
It really is. And honestly, I would just say whatever Kale does is probably the right decision because he obviously knows more about wrestling than all of us. So I'm going to defer to his judgment. But at this point, you can't even really make the argument of, it's like, I guess from what people are saying, Rasheed beat him in the wrestle-off 7-4. At least that's what I've been seeing floating around. But I mean, the question on my mind is always, it doesn't really matter who wins the wrestle-off. It really matters who performs out under the lights. And both these guys have been performing incredibly well.
Exactly.
Especially lately. So, I mean, I really, really don't know what I would answer to that. I really don't have an answer.
I know.
I would say you keep rotating them both until Big Tens, and then you go with, I don't know, you make your decision then.
I think right now you wrestle Rasheed because Rasheed has won everything. He's done everything you've asked him to do. He wins the scuffle. He's pounded everybody in dual meets, and he won the wrestle off, right? So for us, competition. So if one guy was clearly the better guy in the room, soundly won the wrestle off, it would only be reevaluated if one guy completely outperformed the other, right? Which is clearly not the case here. So they're pretty level throughout, and Rasheed won the wrestle off. There's no wrong answer, right? Either guy you send is going to be a top 10 kid at worst. But I think right now you kind of have to go Rasheed. If the season ends today, if you got to put your Big Ten entry list in, I kind of think Rasheed, but I don't know. Like you said, Kale knows more about it than all of us combined. So I'm sure whoever he picks will be all right. So to kind of stick with that theme, let's get into our weekend results. Penn State, Ohio State. We could have an entire podcast just about this dual meet. It was the best dual meet I've ever seen for so many reasons. The atmosphere in Rec Hall, the storylines at each weight. I mean, even the outline for this duel is, a page long just because of the storylines at each weight and the momentum swings. And you had a dual meet with seven national champs take the mat and 2 national finals rematches. It was incredible stuff, man. You go from the bottom up, and the Stormin' Mormon, Carson Kuhn, comes out and was awesome for about 3.5 minutes and about ripped NATO's head off in a headlock. He definitely hit the wall pretty hard. I'm sure it's a combination of he hasn't wrestled a guy at that level quite yet, and it's his first time down getting used to 25.
I'll tell you what, though, if that kid gets in shape by Big Tens, he could be a serious problem at 125.
He could definitely, he's not going to... At least
from what we saw for those 3 minutes.
Right. He's not going to beat one of those top guys, but at least not one of those top 3 of Spencer, Suriano, and NATO in no particular...
I would definitely see him as a potential qualifier, though, which was something that before he stepped in the lineup, Penn State was not going to have at that weight.
Right. And when you've got a guy that's that dangerous, he's always got a puncher's chance. If that headlock lands inbound, if that headlock is 6 inches further on the mat, it's definitely not out of the realm that Tomasello gets decked. Because it was really, really pretty, and it was tight. So, but Kuhn did his job. In the end, he did his job and lasted 7 minutes. Only gives up a major. Kid saved 2 points. At least one. You say Tomasello might not be the biggest pinner on planet Earth, which he's not. But he definitely saved the point because everybody in America was expecting a tech there.
Yeah, and that every point counted, as we saw. So
Right.
hats off to Kuhn for that.
Right. So then you go to 33, and Luke Pletcher just does what he does. He's super solid, super fundamental. He converts on the attacks he has. Kid's just really good. He's quietly having really an outstanding season. He's still undefeated. We're in mid-February, and Luke Pletcher's still undefeated. Winning Vegas.
Yep, not even surprised. This is the Luke Pletcher that came out of high school a couple years ago as, all world pretty much. He was one of the top guys in the country, so it's to be expected, I would say, now that he's down at his natural weight. And when we talked to him in the fall, he kind of said the same thing. So he was confident that he was going to have a great year.
Oh, I'm not saying I'm shocked by it by any means, but he's the number 2 guy in America and is not being talked about at all. The undefeated number 2, the unquestionable number 2 guy in America, who's undefeated in the middle of February with a Big Ten schedule and a Vegas title. So, 41, this was where things really, really started to get interesting for me. So, you've got Lee and McKenna. McKenna goes out and looks better than he has in a while. And when I say a while, I mean probably since the scuffle of last year. He looked like the kid that took third at NCAA's in New York City. That was kind of the Joey McKenna that I'm sure Ohio State was hoping would show up all season. So McKenna goes out, and it was an exciting match. What really won the match was Joey scored a takedown with about 1 or 2 seconds left on the clock, I think in the first period. And he kind of made that one stand up. And I still thought Nick Lee looked awesome. I thought both of these guys competed extremely well. But the wild thing about this was, at the end of 41, I thought Penn State was dead in the water.
Yeah, and I don't think you're alone on that one. I think everyone thought that was a key swing match, really. And without Nolf being in the lineup, if Penn State even had a chance, I think everyone thought that had to happen.
Right. I thought they had to win 41, 74, and 84. And truth be told, I didn't think they could win 97. So, open mouth, insert foot situation for me right there. So,
we'll have to see a GIF of that later.
I am not nearly flexible enough. You know that.
You're a king of the GIFs on Twitter, so we meant to see a GIF of that.
Oh, I can definitely get a GIF that represents it. That's not a problem.
Okay. That's what I want to see.
All right. So, 49, Zane does Zane things. Keyshawn Hayes, it's not often you can say this, but when you wrestle Zane, you can say this. Albeit the fact that he got teched, I was actually impressed with Keyshawn.
Yeah, he definitely didn't back down, at least in the first period. He came right out there and
took him down twice.
Stepped on the line. Yep, exactly.
Right. So, and then, once Zane gets on top of you, what do you do? Because he's just, it's got to be horrible. And when he picks top, that has to be just so disheartening.
Demoralizing, as you put on the outline. Great word for that.
Just, ugh. Zane picking top is like when you got in trouble in school as a kid, and you got home, and your mom was the first one home. Goes, I'm not even going to say it. Just wait till your dad gets home. And you kind of had to wait around and wait till your dad got home, and then you saw your dad pull in the driveway. That's what Zane taking top is like.
A young Mason Beckman out there just causing trouble at old Reynolds Elementary School.
Happened on occasion. It did. But that is exactly how I imagine it. Because it's just that dread of exactly what's coming. You know how bad it's going to be. And there's not a thing you can do about it.
Oh, Mason, by the way, I got to insert this random tangent real quick here, and then we'll get back onto this duel. I just got to let the fans know, Reynolds High School ranked in the top 50 last week in Pennsylvania for worst schools in Pennsylvania for athletics.
Which is accurate. Which is absolutely accurate. Outside of wrestling, our Reynolds High School is terrible at sports.
See, I would not know that, so I was a little taken aback considering what of a dynasty they have in wrestling. So, interesting little tidbit there for you.
Right. The other
do better, Raiders.
I would
agree
with that. The other sport that we consistently, I don't know how they are now, but they consistently had some pretty high level kids was track and field. They always had some pretty good track athletes. But other team sports were no bueno. So, 57, obviously no Nolf, so Bo Pfeiffer got elected to go get teched by Micah. He shoots a lot of single legs. He shoots a lot. I thought Micah looked really good. I thought Pfeiffer fought pretty hard, but just isn't there. I don't think there's much to look at in 57, right?
No. 165, Chenzo, aside from getting complimented by the commentators about how good he looks, also looked really good at wrestling, I would say. As you picked up a stall point and a nice double just in the last 10 seconds to get the major, but he pretty much dominated that whole match. And those are two guys, I think the commentator even said they've been wrestling each other since they were 8 years old. So I think Chenzo not only had an edge there on the mat, but just a mental edge too, kind of like a big brother situation.
I was just going to say there's definitely a little bit of big brother there. The double that Chenzo hit to major him was so nice. And that match is a perfect example of that intangible, that mentality that makes guys like Chenzo special. You know, being able to get that stall point and run through a double in the last 10 seconds because your team needs it, that's big boy stuff. That's national champ stuff.
Yep. 174. Yeah, I was going to say Mark Hall just, no matter how many times you see him do that duck and no matter how many times you know some sort of duck is coming, it almost looks unstoppable. That was an absolutely filthy duck under at the end to get that win over Bo Jordan.
Yeah, it was awesome.
He also took him down pretty early in that period, right? So he had to ride him out the whole rest of the period to get that win, and he did.
Yeah, I want to say Bo had almost a minute and a half to get out.
Yeah. That's a tough time to ride out a national finalist. And similar to the Spencer Lee situation from a few weeks ago, he found a way to get the job done. The close matches, you got to ride good guys out.
Yeah, and Hall just kept doing the work to Matt return him. So then you go to 84, Nickel and Miles Martin. First and foremost, that is by far the best Bo Nickel we've seen all year. And I don't even think it's close. So Bo looked good. His shots were crisp. The couple high crotches he hit were so filthy that they're probably R-rated material and censored on cable television. The only real, and we already talked about the turn at the end, so we can kind of skip past that. The only real interesting part of this bout was in the first period, they get into a scramble. Well, I shouldn't say they get into a scramble. Miles gets behind Bo, rear standing, and Bo puts his hand down as he goes to Granby. They call no takedown on the mat. Bo ends up on top of it, so they just call a takedown for Nickel. They review it, and I thought for sure it was going to get reversed. I thought for sure Martin was going to end up with a takedown. And it just goes to show why I'm not an official, I guess. But it was upheld, and I guess I was just really confused. You know, they talk about that flash takedown rule all the time. If you're in a rear standing position, as soon as a hand hits, it's freeze framed right there, and it's a takedown. So that was the only real thing I was concerned about. And look, it wouldn't have changed the outcome of the match. Bo was clearly the better guy.
It could have changed the situation of it being a major or not, though, which could have changed the whole win-loss result of the dual meet. Because I think it came down to criteria. I think Ohio State wins that one.
That is very true. So maybe it did. Then 97, this is where things, at this point, Penn State was wrestling well. And the thought in my head as Cassar took the mat was Ohio State's going to win this duel, but only because Nolf was out. Right? That's what was in my head going to 97. And then Cassar comes out, and at first I was a little bit confused when I heard that Cassar was going to be the guy. And the more I kind of thought about this stylistically, so Colin Moore's a pretty big 97-pounder. Rasheed is not. And if you send Rasheed trying to beat a kid like Colin Moore, you're almost trying to go for a knockout, right? You're almost purely trying to pin the guy. Cassar such a good athlete. He's so good positionally. And exactly what you saw. He had a couple of beautiful reattacks, got himself through. Colin Moore. So, Tristan, you and I talked about who we thought Penn State would send. I know I said Rasheed. I was initially surprised that they sent Cassar, but the more I thought about it, it actually made sense. And, never doubt Kale.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I thought maybe Rasheed just purely based on how hot he's been lately. You kind of ride the hot hand type situation. But like I said, I always defer to Kale. He obviously knew who to go with and paid off in a huge way.
Right. So then you go to heavy. Penn State by 4, and Snyder's got to win by 13 because of criteria. So the real main thing in this match was that this was the first time I ever watched a match of Snyder's that I thought the moment got to him. That I thought the moment kind of dictated how he wrestled instead of him just wrestling normal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's definitely true. I would say the biggest indicator or illustrator of what you just said was that I'm not even sure if it was a lateral drop or like a double overhook throw that he tried, but I've never really seen him try to hit that in folk style, at least not in the, against another top 10 kid and All-American. Have you?
No. I've never seen him hit it, period. So, but Nick Neville's did his job, kept it to a regular decision. Rec Hall goes bonkers, and you know what? Hats off to everybody in that duel. All 20 guys competed hard. It was an incredible thing to watch. It was just a world of fun. That was as much fun as I've ever had sitting there on a Saturday night watching wrestling, and that says a lot for me because I am an absolute junkie with the sport. So, I guess, elsewhere around the country over the weekend, you got Pitt lost to NC State. Hayden Hidlay, Michael Boykin, Pete Renda, all 3 Pennsylvania natives, all wrestling for the Wolfpack, all got wins. Boykin, the big one over Ryan Solomon, that, from what I was told, should solidify him as the starter for NC State at heavyweight. No Kevin Jack Macchiavello or Sean Foz, 3 top 6 guys for the pack, but they didn't need them, so they didn't wrestle them.
Yeah, that's impressive for NC State to go out there against Pitt, who's, even though they're having a little bit of a down year, they're always a formidable opponent, and they have 3 guys in the top 6 not even wrestle, and they still win that one.
Handily.
That just shows what Papalizio's doing down there.
Right. And then the other main result here was Dom Fories picked up a win in a wild match over Tariq Wilson at 133. So that's a good win for Fories. Clarion gets a win over number 18 rider Toby Cahill, freshman heavyweight, with a fall to win the duel. Another important bout here was Brock Zackerl wins over Tyson Buck Dippery 3-1. A couple of Pennsylvania guys going at it there.
I think Zackerl just cracked the top 5 for the first time in his career, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, he did.
I think he's over Dean Heil now.
Yeah, what a bizarre world we're living in. Not that Brock's not that good, just who would have thunk it coming into the season.
I mean, yeah, Brock gave Dean everything he could handle in the first round at NCAAs last year. Had a lead on him in the second or third period, so.
Penn splits their matches up in the New England swing. They beat Harvard and they lose to Brown. Drexel nabs a couple of wins over Hofstra and Ryder. Austin DeSanto scored 18 points in a minute and 21 seconds in his first match, and then won 10-6 against Ryder. So, weird, but he still scored 28 points in 2 matches, which is absurd. Garrett Hammond gets a big win over BJ Clagan, so that's really Hammond's first big win of the season, I'd say. So, good to see him doing big things. Lockhaven and Cornell was a really fun duel. 20-18 Cornell it ends. No John J. Chavez at 65 for Cornell, so bummed we didn't get to see that one with him and Chance. Big win for Clucker, though, the old Clucker, over Freddie Stroker, who has Pennsylvania ties. Iowa goes 2-0 on the weekend, which in and of itself is whatever, but Spencer Lee Tex Ethan Lezak. This match is bizarre for a lot of reasons. What to make of this. Obviously, we know how good Spencer is, how good he is on top, which is where all this comes from. Are people figuring Lezak out? There's just a lot of watching that match and looking at that result was just a bizarre thing, you know? So, Ethan Lezak's, his march is going to be interesting, man. Because if he gets hot again, and he is the kind of guy that can score, he can score 12 points in 45 seconds on top. So, I don't know. That not a result that a few months ago any of us would have expected, but kind of a little bit of a fall from grace for Lezak, and Spencer is very much on the rise. The other result for Spencer over the weekend was a big weekend for him. He wins over Sebastian Rivera of Northwestern. Spencer seems to keep getting these big leads, and then he kind of sits on them, and guys will close the gap. And I get part of it is if you're up 7-0 or if you're up 10-1 like he was against Piccinini, you don't have to keep scoring. But I've never seen Spencer not try to continue scoring. So I'm interested to see how that plays out moving forward.
Yeah, it's interesting too because some of these guys, he goes out like Lezak and Drew Matton, and he texts him, or Sean Russell even goes out and texts him. And then other guys, it seems like it's almost like if he can't get his back points, like if he can't lock up his bar or whatever it is that he's turning these guys with, then the match suddenly becomes close in the second or third period. It almost seems like he's exerting himself to get those back points, and if he can't get them, then it's like he's out of gas for the third period almost. Do you kind of feel the same way? I
totally agree. And obviously, neither of us are close to the situation, but I do think that could possibly be part of it. So yeah, we'll see. The other thing, we already talked about Mikey Carr, had a big win over Cole Weaver from Indiana, who was ranked 13th. Just another kind of notch in the belt for Mikey, moving on up. That's really all we got for the weekend recap. Weekend preview, we'll kind of buzz through this real quick. Don't want to spend too much time. You know, we still got to get to our interview with Pitt Head Coach Keith Gavin. Awesome interview. You guys are really going to enjoy it. But our weekend preview, before we get there, couple of big duels. First one, Penn State, Iowa, just to rattle off some matchups. Zane Rutherford, Brandon Sorensen, rematch of a national final and a national semifinal. Mikey Kemmer gets to come back close to home, only about 2.5 hours away from Pittsburgh. So
does Spencer Lee, for that matter.
Right. Good call. So both of them will get a chance to wrestle somewhat close to home, which isn't common for those guys out at Iowa. Hopefully Spencer can stay out of the tomahawk headlock there by Carson Kuhn. Chenzo Marinelli will be a fun one. Marinelli's still undefeated, actually, so far as a starter. Going to be interesting to see how he lines up with Chenzo. Mark Hall could possibly wrestle Caleb Young, which I'm sure would not be a fantastic experience for Caleb, but Pennsylvania guy that's worth mentioning. Cassar or Shakur Rasheed, we don't know. Maybe those two should just start playing rock, paper, scissors in the back to see which one gets to wrestle. That seems like
maybe they are. We don't know.
That's true. There's nothing fairer than a best 2 out of 3 rock, paper, scissors.
I agree. As long as both people show their cards at the exact same second.
Well, you got to go. It goes 1, 2, 3, and you show on shoot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Correct.
As long as we're in agreement here. I don't know. The people that show on 3 are communists. So whoever wrestles at 97, they'll wrestle Cash Wilkie, who was around a 12er last year for Iowa. And then in heavyweight, Nick Nevels versus a morning stroll with Sam Stoll. So huge matchups all over this duel. Without Nolf, again, Iowa's still within striking range. I don't think Iowa can get there. Or at least they would need to limit bonus where possible, as much as possible, and try to steal a couple. But going to be a good duel. Going to be in the Bryce Jordan Center there, so there will be 15,000 people screaming their heads off. I'm sure booing Iowa, giving them a taste of their own medicine as far as what they do to people in Carver Hawkeye. So that'll be a fun one.
Yeah, and Chenzo Marinelli is probably my most anticipated match in this one, just because Marinelli's still undefeated in his freshman campaign. Is that right?
Right. Freshman campaign, Midlands champ.
He's just beaten every single person that's come out to wrestle him. He's had a couple matches where you really weren't sure if if this was the match that Marinelli was finally going to lose. Richie Lewis, I think Wanzek, whoever they just wrestled last week. He's beaten everybody that stepped on the mat with him. So that'll be interesting, him against Chenzo. And then kind of a shame for Mikey Carr. I know when we interviewed him back in the fall or in the summer, whenever it was, he was really looking forward to the Nolf match. I even remember asking him, I think the way I worded the question was, how do you close the gap on a guy like Jason Nolf? And he even kind of corrected my question and said, it's not even closing the gap, it's how do you beat him? So, this is definitely a match he was looking forward to. We talked about him coming back to the BJC for that match. So, he's probably going to get Bo Pfeiffer. So, maybe not the matchup he was looking for, but an opportunity for him to pick up bonus points for the Hawkeyes there.
Right, that does suck it sucks for everybody, obviously. It's not like Nolf wants to be hurt. So that'll be a great duel. The other really big one, 2 top 10 teams. Lehigh goes to Tempe. They'll wrestle at Arizona State. I will actually be in attendance at this one, my first time out in the desert. But Darian Cruz will wrestle Milhoff. This is a match, if you will remember, in New York City that Milhoff won in the round of 12 in overtime. So I believe this will be the first time they've wrestled since then. So Darian may be looking for a little revenge or just to go out and score some points. Before we even get into 133, big news here. Scotty Parker and Ryan Price are back in the lineup. They both wrestled one bout at the Edinburgh Open because the staff wanted them to get mat time before the Arizona State duel. You don't want to take a guy all the way to Tempe and, maybe they get out there and start rolling around in a live situation and it doesn't feel right. But either way, Scotty and Price are both back. 33 will be Scotty and Ali Nazer, who a little bit hot and cold, but when he's on, man. 65, Gordon Wolf and Anthony Valencia, which happened a couple of years ago at the Journeyman thing and was just a total train wreck of a match. So I'm excited to see that one again. Because Wolf is the kind of guy, if you shoot on him, it turns into a full-blown party. And Valencia's not afraid to shoot.
So things could get interesting is what you're saying.
Right. That's one of those matches that it could be 3-2 because all the scrambles could get stalemated. Or it could be 20-19. Or it could be 20-3. You know what I mean? There are so many different ways that match could play out that it'll be interesting to watch it. And then 74, easily the match of the night. Number 1 and number 4 guys in America, Zahid Valencia and Jordan Cutler. Going to be an interesting style matchup. And the question remains, can anybody stay with Zahid? The only guy we've really seen able to do it was Bo Jordan in the Vegas finals, where Zahid got a big lead, and then Jordan was digging back, and then there's the whole challenge brick fiasco. So
Mark Hall gave him a pretty good tussle at the All-Star Classic, too, if we're going to count that.
Right, okay. So, we count that. So, yeah, you had the 3-2 match with Mark Hall, and then the match in the Vegas finals with Bojo. So, it's going to be interesting to see how Cutler fares. Zahid's a guy that he's such an athletic freak. He can do so many things that almost nobody else can do. Honestly, kind of in the same way that Mark Hall can. They're definitely different, very different styles, but they both have the ability, that freak gene. Zahid's speed is just, his speed and the way he level changes is unbelievable. It's almost unlike anybody I've ever watched. And Hall just has that freaky scramble feel that you can't teach. He just kind of has it, So Cutler Zahid will be fun. Price will return against Cordell Norfleet, who's been in and out of the top 20. And then a top 12 matchup at heavyweight, Jordan Wood and Tanner Hall. So I don't know if you got any thoughts.
I got to say, there's like a 10-year age difference between Jordan Wood and Tanner Hall. Jordan Wood's a redshirt freshman, and Tanner Hall, I think he's got to be close to a fifth-year senior by now, but he's also a 2 or 3 year Mormon mission guy that's actually in my grade. So I want to say he's got to be pushing 26, 27, whatever, 26 years old.
Oh, Hall's in your grade.
Yeah, he came out of high school in my grade.
Yikes.
2010.
That's wild.
Yeah.
So that'll be an interesting match.
Can't imagine stepping on a mat right now and wrestling in college.
No thank you.
No bueno.
Other matchups going on. around the wrestling world, we got Drexel and Cornell, so you get to see DeSanto and Chaz Tucker, as well as Stephen Loiseau and Ben Darmstadt. Penn takes a trip. Penn at home will wrestle Cornell and Columbia. Pitt wrestles South Dakota State at home, which you'll get to see Dom Fories and Seth Gross. Then they travel to Duke. Clarion goes to Bloomsburg. Then they're home against Lock Haven. So you got all the PSAC schools rocking and rolling. Not all of them, but a few of them rocking and rolling against each other there. Edinburgh takes their yearly set of interesting matches. They go to Oklahoma this year, so they are at Oklahoma State and Oklahoma. You'll get to see Sean Russell, Nick Piccinini, Corbin Myers, Cade Brock, as well as Billy Miller and Derek White at heavyweight. Those are all in the Oklahoma State duel. So some good matchups there. I think Edinburgh liable to take one on the chin in Stillwater, but be some good individual bouts, and it'll be entertaining wrestling to watch. And then beyond that, Tristan, I know you got a couple things that you kind of wanted to touch on before we got into the interview with Coach Gavin, so I'm going to give you the floor.
Yeah, we had several discussion questions we could talk about here, but for the sake of time, we'll just touch on a few here. Number one, since it's a recent topic here, what do you think about Ohio State wearing the robes out there at Rec Hall? I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb and say we had the robes in high school. I never actually got to wear one, but I thought they were a cool thing. But, looking back, it's kind of a lose-lose situation. They go out there. I almost feel like they went out there a little cocky, thinking North South, there's no way they're losing this duel. They walk out there with the robes on, and I don't know if they ever wear those before. I don't see all of their matches, but they go out to Rec Hall wearing the robes. I almost feel like if you lose in them, obviously you look bad, and if you win in them, I mean, it just comes off as kind of arrogant. What do you think, Mason? I
thought they were cool. Personally, I don't really have an issue with it. I think people are reading way too much into it.
That's fair. I mean, I think they are cool, but
here's my thing, I guess. I'm sure it was the kids' decision, the team's decision, and they wanted to wear robes, so let them wear robes. They're kids. They're college kids. You know what I mean? You only have 4 years to do it. They wanted to do something cool, something different for the biggest dual meet of the year, not just of theirs, in the country. So let them go do it.
I agree. I mean, that's cool. That's good. That's a good point.
You know what I mean? Like I just
thought it was. I don't know if they typically ever do that before, but if not,
I don't believe so.
It seemed like it was a little like chip on their shoulder type thing, which I guess is a good thing. You want to go out there confident, but it almost just seemed like they went out there like, there's no way we're losing this duel, and Penn State found a way. But yeah, I agree. I mean, if it is cool to wear the robes, so.
Yeah, I mean, I can say, now we didn't exactly have the best colors to be able to wear robes, but that aside, it would have been cool. Especially on a team like that, it would have been real cool. So, I liked the robes.
Okay, next discussion question. Why do some guys never drop in the rankings? That's what I had. I just feel like in my career, I had to knock off several guys in the top 20 to even get myself in the top 20. And then all it took was one loss, and I would drop right back out. And I feel like there's some guys, granted, some of them have a better body of work overall, especially if you look at their years past. But, like, for example, Colin Moore is still ranked number 1 right now, and Cassar is like 8.
But
why do some guys
5,
never drop? Okay, Colin Moore's number 1 still, though. But and there's other guys.
Who are you going to put?
There's other guys, if you look through the rankings, there's other guys in the top 10 even who have lost several times recently, and I feel like they just never drop.
Right, so, I mean...
it takes a lot.
The Colin Moore situation, who are you going to put ahead of him? Hot is the 2. He's beaten Hot every single time. The 3 is Darmstadt. Darmstadt has lost to Miklas and his own teammate. So you look at it, it's easy to have the recency bias, but if you're going to rank based on an entire body of work, even just from this season, again, using Moore as the example, you got to put him as the 1. Have to. I do think you're right, though. There's definitely a bias towards certain guys. Maybe some of it's body of work. Maybe some of it's a little bit of a perception thing. That maybe a guy was a really highly touted recruit coming out of high school. or wrestles for a big name program, you'll never be able to tell me that guys in the Ohio State lineup or in the Penn State lineup or the Iowa lineup, they get, and I'm not saying that people do this intentionally, but they get a bump just because you expect more out of guys that put on those singlets.
That's a good point. And also, in fairness to some of those teams, they do wrestle a pretty tough schedule. Those Big Ten guys, they almost have more of an opportunity to lose and to slip up because they're every Friday, Sunday, it seems like they're wrestling another top 20 guy.
Right. Last year, Mitch McKee who was around a 12er. McKee had like 20 losses. But literally all 20 were to top 10 guys. He just wrestled an outrageous schedule. I don't know if it was 20 losses, but you get the point. I know he had double-digit losses, and I'm pretty sure it was more than 15. And all of them were to guys that I may have even been All-Americans. So, wrestling in the Big Ten, especially depending on the weight, you hit a lot of really good dudes. So, you want to touch on
anything? That said, I was going to say, with that said, we could save some of our other ones for next time. I think we're ready to throw it over to our interview with Keith Gavin.
Awesome. So we'll throw it over to the interview with Coach Gavin, and we'll bring it back and wrap it up for episode 25. So here we go with the interview with Keith Gavin. Pitt alum, current Pitt head coach, former world team member, and national champion, Keith Gavin. Coach, thanks for joining the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So you're in your first season as a head coach. You got your first opportunity to lead a program at your alma mater. Talk about what that's like. Not only your first experience as a head coach, but to be at your alma mater. Back in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, no, well, it's pretty special. And it's not something that's lost on me. As you know, in Division I college wrestling, it's not like head coaching jobs just pop up all the time. Good ones like this, and for it to be my alma mater, it's a pretty special opportunity that I got here. So I'm very grateful for it. I'm very thankful that I have this opportunity, and I'm able to lead this program and do the best that I can to see how good we can be here.
About 2/3 of the way through your first year, what have things been like so far? And, what have kind of been the focuses for you on, turning your alma mater around and getting them back to that, top 15 program that you guys were for so long?
Yeah. Well, recruiting has been a huge focus. There's no way around it. That's how you do it. You can't, you gotta get the right kids. You gotta get guys that love wrestling. And that's the lifeblood of any program, so recruiting's been a huge focus. And then with the current guys on the team, it's just, focusing on daily improvement, and in the beginning, it's a lot of like getting to know who they are. Now it feels like we're past all that. We know who these guys are. We know what they're into and what they can do. And now we're just, again, focused on daily improvement and trying not to look too far ahead, and just trying to continue to be the best wrestlers that we can be. And spend a lot of time, correcting mistakes and things like that, and trying to motivate these guys to get the best out of themselves.
Right. And, you guys have some pretty good upperclassmen presence with guys like Dom Fories, Nick Zanetta, and Solomon. Yeah. What have those guys done for you, not just you, but you guys as a coaching staff, and kind of making the transition to a new staff and everything and through the season?
Yeah, it's been helpful to have those guys for sure. They all have experience. Dom is a really good example in the room. That's just the way he trains and the way he competes is a great example for our team. So it's nice to have that. It's always good to have a great example. Same thing with Ryan Solomon. Ryan Solomon's a heavyweight, and he's always running back to the center and trying to out hustle the guy, and that. Things like that go a long way. If you get everybody on your team just doing out hustling and not trying to outwork the guy, fixing the technical errors is kind of the simple part of it, So having Dom and Ryan and Nick is a little bit of a different way. Nick is a pretty mature kid, and he's almost like it's like having another coach on staff a little bit, I mean, he likes wrestling. He loves trying to figure stuff out. And so I think that, what I mean is like wrestling technique, he likes trying to figure that stuff out. But having those three guys, they kind of lead in different ways, but having them here has been helpful. It would have been made a difficult task much more difficult if we didn't have those three seniors on our team.
So, back when you got the job, last summer, I know that was it was a very public process as far as kind of what went on, with the different candidates and everything. What was that process like for you? Kind of how did you get involved in it, and how did it all play out?
Yeah, it was. I mean, the whole thing was public. I mean, even the transition here, and then the interview process and all that. So it was a little strange, for sure. I think, I knew everybody that they interviewed. The wrestling world's pretty small, so talked to a lot of those guys, and I know a lot of good people in wrestling, and I know a lot of people that know our athletic director, Heather. Like, she worked at Ohio State for a while, and I spent some time there with the Ohio Regional Training Center. So she was actually the sport administrator for wrestling at Ohio State. And obviously I know those coaches at Ohio State very well. And so heard great things about her and how she backed wrestling, and understood that, there's an opportunity here at Pitt to be really good at wrestling. So that was really exciting. But I kind of get into it late. I think that, I'm one of the younger guys that they interviewed, and I think anytime, that you have an open position like that, the younger guy might scare you a little bit, but I got the interview, and it was, the interview was pretty seamless for me because I just followed this program for so long, and I have a lot of passion, for Pitt, so it's not like something I haven't thought about before. It came pretty natural, to do the interview and things like that. So that all went really well, and I felt really good about it leaving there. And then I was fortunate enough to be able to get the job.
So, kind of in there, you talked about different places that you've trained, or that, you coached with Lou Roselli at Oklahoma and everything. You spent time out at Lehigh with those guys.
Yeah.
And then obviously you competed at Pitt, all the way through college. So, through all of those experiences, who were your biggest, coaching mentors, and kind of what were you able to learn from all of those different people?
Yeah, I would always say I was like very fortunate to be, around good wrestling coaches, but good people too, the whole time through, my wrestling career. And when I was at Pitt, we had Coach Stottlemyer, who, he was known for being a great guy. And Pitt is a special place because it's such a wrestling rich area where there's just so many people that were really good wrestlers that would come through here. I remember when I was in school, Matt King, Jared King's older brother, wrestled for Edinburgh, was an All-American. He was in grad school here at Pitt, and it'd be like Saturday, he'd come in and wrestle with me, so that's just one example. But I had Sonny Abe was a big help to me. I did a lot of extra stuff with him, and he helped me with a lot of technique and things like that. So in my collegiate career, I was just surrounded by good people, but also like really good wrestlers, because like I said, this area in general is really rich with wrestling. And then, like you said, I went on to Lehigh, and I knew Coach Santoro for a while because he's a Pitt alum, and he would come back once in a while. So, anybody who wrestled for Pitt at that time knew of Pat. And so we kind of developed a relationship, and he was somebody that, he's kind of like me in a way that we're wrestling junkies. We would just talk wrestling and from international wrestling to collegiate wrestling to everything. So I really enjoyed my time with him, and Lehigh was a fun time there. And being able to train with the Lehigh Valley Athletic Club, and was able to do some good things there. And then really what brought me to Columbus was my wife. I got married when I was in Lehigh, and she had a job opportunity, and one of the places, they gave her a list of places that she had to relocate to, and one of them was Columbus, Ohio, and that was the only one where I can still train, because Ohio State had a great regional training center. So I ended up calling those guys and saying, "Hey, my wife's got a job in Columbus. Do you guys mind if I join your RTC?" And they were pretty receptive to that. And again, I knew Lou Roselli because he coached at Edinboro while I was in college, and I always had a ton of respect for Edinboro and what they were able to do, with limited resources. But and so I went there, and I was one of the first guys there, and then that thing just blew up, the Ohio Regional Training Center, and I learned a lot just from being around there, from Lou about training and how to train and prepare for a high level event, how to train and compete at an elite level, in the world stage. And then from Tom Ryan, just on like how the business side of things, he was a grinder with that RTC, and he raised a ton of money for it. And, he really ran that thing pretty well. And obviously, a couple of years later, they won a national title. So it worked out pretty well.
So, you mentioned Coach Stottlemyer, who, I'm sure everybody knows, recently passed away, obviously a sad situation. Both just as an athlete, as a person, I'm sure he was one of your mentors beyond just wrestling. Just talk a little bit about Coach Stottlemyer and everything that he meant to you, to the program, just in general.
Yeah, Coach Stottlemyer was mostly beyond wrestling stuff. He was really invested in the people he brought into the program. And when you're a student athlete, and you're 18 to 22 years old, it's, at least for me, I kind of took that stuff for granted, and I think that maybe I didn't realize, just how special that was. That, my collegiate career was a little different. It was kind of not a blue chip recruit. I got here, I was average, not someone that a lot of coaches would have put time into or would have believed that was going to be good. But Coach Stottlemyer did believe in me, and I worked hard and did those type of things, but a lot of people work hard, but for some reason he let me redshirt when I wanted to redshirt, and that was huge for me. And then all of a sudden I started getting, I was getting better and better, and then I ended up, being able to win the nationals. But it really, I said this in another interview, but there was a lot of chances or a lot of opportunities for him to just be like, not pay any attention to me or give up on me in some sense of the word. But he didn't. And, but it wasn't just me. It was like that with everybody. If he brought you in here, he was loyal and wanted to see guys succeed and get their degree and go on to do things. You hear stories from alumni all the time about, guys who are doctors saying that if it wasn't for Coach Stottlemyer, they would have never gotten into medical school, so most of his impact was beyond wrestling, and that's pretty special. And when I was here, he had a ton of experience. He coached at Pitt for like 35 years, and I got here in 2003. So by that time, I think he's seen it all, so that was helpful, that he was very, very experienced. And, when I would struggle or a teammate would struggle, whether it's academically or in the room or socially or whatever it may be, it wasn't new to him. He's done this a million times. So, yeah, we all feel, when I say we all, alumni, Pitt wrestling alumni, I think all feel grateful to have had Coach Stottlemyer be a mentor in our lives.
Yeah, I can even just say from, the way that Coach Santoro always talked about him, and just the fact that, anytime Pat was out here, even remotely close to Pittsburgh, he would go out of his way to see him.
Yeah.
I think that's
when I was in college, Pat would come back. Yeah, Pat would come back, and I remember, I think I was a sophomore, and Pat came back to see Randy, and I got to work, wrestled with Pat and went over technique and stuff with him in the Pitt wrestling room, and it was just, but that's how a lot of people were, when he had his retirement party, the place was packed with all those guys came back, and and paying their respects and things like that to Coach Stottlemyer.
Well, good stuff, man. That's pretty much all I had. I'll kind of give you the floor. Anything you want to get out there as far as, recruits or parents listening in, about what you guys are doing at Pitt Wrestling and what you have to offer to kids out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Pitt's a good brand, so I think a lot of people probably know that it's a good school, obviously, academically. But what we're trying to do as a staff and a new staff here is we're just trying to create a culture and a philosophy of the kids in this program. We want them to try to reach their full potential. You don't have to be perfect, but you have to get better. And I think that's what sets apart elite wrestlers from average wrestlers, and elite people from average people, is that they're constantly striving to get better. They're continuous learners. They're not satisfied. They're trying to reach their full potential and see how far they can take this thing. So, that's the culture that we're trying to create here. And I'm very confident that we have what we need to be successful here. It's just like anything, it takes time to reach high goals, but we're going to get there. But yeah, that's about it.
All right. Well, hey, Coach, thank you again for taking the time and joining us. Know how busy this time of year is, and good luck the rest of the way, man. Well, I'm sure we'll see you before long.
All right. Thanks. Appreciate it.
All right. Take it easy, man.
See ya.
All right. Once again, we thank Coach Keith Gavin from Pitt for joining us for that interview. Mason, as always, fans, listeners, please go ahead and submit your questions or your discussion topics to us on Twitter, so we can throw out some more things to ramble about for next episode. Mason, you got anything else for us?
No, man. As always, thank you everybody for listening. Love all the questions that have been coming of late, so keep those coming. Crunch time's here. February, we're getting into late February, into March. I'm excited. Jacked up. Postseason is almost here. It's getting exciting.
All right, and that's going to wrap it up for us at the PA Power College Podcast. Thanks for dialing in. As always, I'm Tristan Warner. Find me on Twitter at WarrenTriz, and you can find Mason Beckman at Beck_Diggity. Visit PAPowerWrestling.com for all your wrestling needs. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at PAPowerWrestle, and go ahead and give us a friend request on Facebook. Until next time, stay classy, wrestling fans.